My friend Renee texted me a screenshot at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Her banking app, balance field front and center, $4.12. Under it, one word. Made it! I stared at that text longer than I probably should have, because out of context, $4.12 looks like a 5-alarm emergency, not something worth celebrating. I almost called her right then to see if she was okay. Renee and I met at our neighborhood book club, the kind where half of us haven't actually finished the book and just show up for the wine and the adult conversation. She's the mom who always brings something a little too fancy for what everyone else brought, and I found out much later that a little too fancy was usually the result of her stretching a grocery budget so precisely that a homemade dessert was actually the cheaper option. Over 3 years of that same monthly book club, through 2 job losses on her end and 1 very ugly divorce, I got to know that particular tone in her texts. That wasn't panic, that was pride. It took me until the next morning, over coffee she'd already budgeted for 2 weeks earlier, to understand what made it actually meant. $4.12 wasn't what was left after a crisis. It was what was left after a plan, executed exactly, down to the cent, for 14 straight days, on an income that a lot of people would tell you can't be budgeted at all. Renee makes about $2,200 a month. Rent alone is $1,100. That leaves $1,100 to cover electricity, water, gas for the car, groceries for herself and her 3 kids, school fees, the occasional doctor's copay, and anything else that life decides to bring that particular month. And life is not known for waiting until there's room in the budget for it. I'd read plenty of budgeting advice over the years, the kind that tells you to cut back on takeout coffee or renegotiate your streaming subscriptions. And none of it had ever once accounted for a month where the only real question is which bill gets to be a few days late. Watching Renee actually work through a full pay period, spreadsheet open, calculator in hand, was the first time I understood why that advice had always felt so hollow. It wasn't wrong, exactly. It was just written for a completely different math problem than the one she was solving. I'm Alora, and this is the Finance Mom HQ. Today I'm telling you Renee's story and the 10 specific things she does that let her run a household on an income that most budgeting advice completely ignores. Not the version of budgeting that assumes you have slack to cut. The version for when there is no slack left to cut and the only thing left to manage is precision. Before we get into it, I want to say something plainly because Renee said it to me first and it changed how I talk about this topic entirely. Being low income is not a discipline problem. Every single habit on this list exists because Renee is one of the most disciplined, resourceful people I know, and she still has to work twice as hard for the same dollar as someone earning more. Nothing here is about trying harder. It's about the specific mechanics that make a tight income actually survivable week to week without the constant low hum of dread. It's the 3rd of the month, and instead of one big number sitting in her head labeled this month's budget, Renee has a strip of paper taped inside her kitchen cabinet with 30 numbered boxes. One for every day left until her next paycheck. Each box already holding a specific dollar amount. The misconception is that a monthly budget is more sophisticated than a daily one. For a stable income with some cushion, sure, but on a tight income, a monthly number is too abstract to actually stop a bad decision in the moment. A daily number is not. When Renee looks at Tuesday's box and sees $18, that's not a suggestion. That's the whole remaining world for groceries and gas until Wednesday's box opens. The month she started the system, she told me she underspent her old monthly budget by absolutely nothing, because a monthly number has too much room to hide in. The first month she switched to daily boxes, she came in $4 under, on purpose, every single day, because there was nowhere left to hide. Take whatever's left until your next paycheck, divide it across the remaining days, and write the daily number somewhere you'll see it every morning. Not the whole month, just today's box. The first time I tried this myself, just as an experiment, I noticed something Renee had already told me to expect. The monthly number in my head had always felt vague enough to argue with. The way, I'll start Monday, always feels easier to break than an actual appointment on the calendar. A daily number doesn't leave room for that kind of negotiation. It's either $18 today or it isn't. And there's a strange, almost immediate relief in not having to make that judgment call 30 times over the course of a month. Paycheck hits at midnight, and by 7 a.m., Renee has already moved rent, the electric minimum, and the phone bill into a separate account before she's even had coffee, before anything else in the world has had a chance to touch that money. The misconception here is that budgeting means tracking spending after the fact. For Renee, the entire game is won or lost in the first hour after the paycheck lands, not at the end of the month. If the essential bills move first, automatically, before the day even really starts, there's no version of the following 2 weeks where rent doesn't get made, no matter what else goes sideways. She told me the first time she tried this, moving $340 out before she'd even eaten breakfast felt like it shouldn't be legal, like she was hiding money from herself. But that's exactly the point. She was hiding it from the version of herself who hadn't had a hard day yet and might make a different call about it at 9 at night. The morning your next paycheck lands, before anything else, move your essential bill money into a separate account or envelope. Let future you find it already handled. Watch her in the cereal aisle sometime. She's not comparing brands by taste or habit. She's running a silent per-unit tally as she walks, because on her income, a 40-cent difference times 8 items a week is real, recurring money, not a rounding error. The misconception is that this kind of price tracking is exhausting or extreme. It becomes automatic within a couple of weeks, the same way checking a mirror before changing lanes becomes automatic. It's not obsessive. It's just where the muscle memory goes when every dollar has already been assigned a job before you ever reach the store. Renee did the math for me once out of pure curiosity, running the per-unit comparison consistently on just her 10 most bought grocery items saved her about $26 a month. That's not a dramatic number by itself. It's also exactly the gap between running short on day 28 and making it to day 30 with $4 to spare. Pick your 5 most frequently bought grocery items and actually check the per-unit price, not just the sticker price, before you grab the familiar one. Every single pay period, before anything else gets touched, $6 goes into an envelope labeled in her own handwriting, just because. Not groceries, not gas, just because. The misconception people have about tight budgets is that they need to eliminate every non-essential expense to work. Renee's actually more disciplined than that. She learned that a budget with zero joy in it doesn't survive contact with a hard week. It just gets abandoned entirely the first time she's exhausted and orders something impulsively to feel better. One small, fully funded, guilt-free category is what keeps the other 29 days honest. $6 a pay period doesn't sound like much, and it isn't in raw terms, but it buys her kids' favorite cheap ice cream bars from the corner store on a Friday, on purpose, planned 2 weeks in advance with zero guilt attached because it was already budgeted before the week even started. Pick one small, specific, fully funded joy category, even $5 or $10, and let yourself spend it without a shred of guilt, because you already planned for it. If any of this is landing so far, I want to tell you quickly why this channel even exists. I started the Finance Mom HQ because I wanted to reach as many moms as I possibly could. Moms nobody ever sat down and actually explained money to, the way nobody sat me down either. Every single person who subscribes brings me one mom closer to that. So if this is helping you even a little, hit subscribe, because it genuinely means this reaches the next Renee, and the one after her. Stand next to her in front of a $12 pair of kids' shoes sometime. Instead of seeing $12, she's seeing 40 minutes of my hourly wage, because she does that conversion automatically, on everything, every time. The misconception is that this kind of mental math is depressing or shame-inducing. For Renee, it's the opposite. It's clarifying. Converting a price into hours worked strips out all the marketing and impulse and leaves just the honest trade being offered. Some things are still worth 40 minutes. A lot of things suddenly aren't, once you see them that clearly. She told me the first time she did this with a $14 candle at a store display, it translated to almost an hour of work, and she put it back without a second thought, not because she couldn't afford it in the abstract, but because an hour of her actual time wasn't what she wanted to spend it on. Pick one thing you're about to buy that isn't essential and translate the price into hours of your own wage before you decide. Open her calendar and you'll find it marked in ink, the second Thursday of every month, a recurring block, same as a dentist appointment, for the food pantry run at her kids' school. It's planned, it's expected, it's simply part of how the math works that month. The misconception, and this is the one Renee gets the most emotional about, is that using assistance programs means the budget has failed. She told me flatly, the budget didn't fail, the wage did. Treating SNAP, WIC, a local food pantry, or utility assistance program as a legitimate line in the plan, the same as any other income source, is not defeat. It's accurate accounting. The month she stopped feeling embarrassed about the pantry run and started actually budgeting around it in advance, she told me it freed up almost $90 that used to get spent, reluctantly, avoiding the trip out of pride. $90, redirected on purpose, is the difference between a rough month and a manageable one. If you qualify for any assistance program and have been avoiding it out of pride, look up one local resource and treat it as a real, planned part of your numbers, not a failure. It looks as simple as this: dried beans instead of canned, a block of cheese instead of the pre-shredded bag, a whole chicken instead of the parts, because the per meal cost drops sharply once you're willing to do 15 extra minutes of prep. The misconception is that this is only about coupons or sales. The bigger, quieter lever is the form the food comes in before you ever get to the register. Renee ran the numbers on beans alone. Dried beans cost her about a fifth of what canned beans do per serving, and the only real cost is remembering to soak them the night before. Over 1 month of doing this across 5 staple categories: rice, beans, cheese, chicken, and oats, she calculated it saved her about $31 for maybe 40 extra minutes of prep spread across the whole month. Less than $1 an hour of extra effort for real recurring savings. Pick one staple you usually buy pre-prepared and try the raw, cheaper form once, even if it costs you a little extra time. The Sunday her dryer stopped heating told me everything I needed to know about this one. Instead of panicking or immediately looking up a new one, Renee pulled out an actual list taped inside a cabinet, titled "When Something Breaks," with steps in order. Check the warranty. Check if a neighbor or the library has a tool lending program. Check a repair video for the exact model. Then, and only then, price a replacement. The misconception is that broken things are unpredictable emergencies that budgets simply can't plan for. Renee's insight was that the emergency isn't the broken dryer, it's the decision paralysis that follows it. And paralysis is exactly the kind of thing you can plan around in advance, even if you can't plan around the breakage itself. Following her own list on that dryer, she found a 50-cent thermal fuse was the actual problem, not a $200 repair or a full replacement. The list didn't fix the dryer. It stopped panic from making an expensive decision faster than a careful one could. Write your own short "when something breaks" checklist in order before anything actually breaks, so a future stressful moment has a plan already waiting for it. What struck me most, watching her go through that list step by step on the dryer, wasn't the 50-cent fuse. It was how calm she was the whole time. No frantic searching, no scrolling through replacement options at midnight while the anxiety built. Just a piece of paper, taped where she could find it, telling a stressed version of herself exactly what to try next. The list had already done the hardest part of the thinking, back when nothing was actually broken, and she had a clear head to do it with. Sunday afternoons look the same at her house, every week. One large pot of something simple, beans and rice, a soup, a chili, portioned immediately into containers before anyone's even eaten a bite. So the decision of what's for dinner is already made for 5 of the next 7 nights. The misconception is that batch cooking requires a freezer full of 40 prepped meals to be worth it. Renee does exactly 1 pot every week, no more. The goal isn't stockpiling. It's removing the single most expensive decision point in her whole week, the exhausted 5:30, "what do we even have" moment that so often ends in a impulsive takeout order. She estimated that before she started this, that exact moment cost her, on average, about $18 a week in impulsive takeout. 1 pot, planned and portioned in advance, brought that down to almost nothing, for roughly the same grocery cost she was already spending. Pick one day to cook exactly 1 big pot of something simple, portion it immediately, and let it answer what's for dinner for you on your hardest weeknights. There's a number in her account she treats like it isn't even there. $40. Always sitting untouched at the bottom of her checking account, existing purely so an unexpected small expense doesn't turn into a missed bill somewhere else. The misconception is that an emergency fund has to be thousands of dollars to matter, which on a tight income can feel so far away it's not even worth starting. Renee's $40 isn't meant to cover a job loss. It's meant to cover the specific, recurring, smaller shocks, a forgotten school fee, a flat tire patch, that would otherwise cannibalize next week's grocery money and start a slow-motion collapse of the whole plan. The one time she did dip below it, a $110 car repair that couldn't wait, she told me she didn't panic because she already had a plan for exactly that moment. Pause the just because envelope for 2 pay periods and rebuild the $40 first, before anything else resumed. Having the rule already written down turned a scary decision into a boring, already answered one. Pick a small, specific floor number for your account, even $20, and write down in advance exactly what you'll pause to rebuild it if you ever have to dip below. Renee told me that $40 rule was the single habit that took the longest to actually stick. Longer than the daily budget boxes, longer than the price translations. For months, whenever something came up, the instinct was always to dip into it and figure out the rebuild later, which almost never actually happened later. What finally made it work wasn't willpower. It was writing the rebuild plan down before she ever needed it, so that in the moment, there was nothing left to decide. The decision had already been made by a calmer version of herself weeks earlier, with a clear head and no emergency in front of her. So that's Renee's list. Daily budgeting instead of monthly, bills paid the hour the paycheck lands, price per unit awareness at the shelf, one small, fully funded joy category, translating prices into hours worked, treating assistance programs as real budget lines, not failures, buying staples in their cheapest usable form, a written plan for when something breaks, one batch cooked pot a week, and one small floor number with a plan already in place for the one time she dips below it. That text I got at 11:47 on a Tuesday night makes complete sense to me now. $4.12 wasn't what was left over by accident. It was the exact, planned outcome of 14 days of precision on a plan Renee had built herself, out of necessity, with no slack anywhere to spare. Made It wasn't relief. It was a plan working exactly as designed. If you're on an income where every one of these decisions matters this much, I hope even one of these 10 helps this week. And if you know someone living exactly this tightrope, the kind of budgeting most advice completely ignores, send them this video. Not because they're doing anything wrong, because Renee proved to me that this takes more discipline, not less, than any budget I've ever seen with room to spare. Renee still texts me every payday. Sometimes it's just one word: made it. Every time I see that message, I'm reminded that success doesn't always look like a big savings account or a perfect financial plan. Sometimes success is simply making it through another month with intention, with dignity, and with hope. If that's where you are today, I want you to know I'm cheering for you. One small decision at a time, one paycheck at a time, one day at a time. It all adds up. I'm Alora, and this is the Finance Mom HQ. Thank you for spending a little time with me today. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and I'll see you in the next one.